Recording now.
Oh, I just got a message.
Yeah.
This meeting is being recorded.
I know, I like that. They
Yeah,
can't do it
hold on, let me take a
sneakily.
sip of water. And the last thing I need is some sort of allergy-induced coughing fit.
Is it allergy induced?
I hope so. Today I fully convinced myself about 3 weeks ago that I had coronavirus. So I don't know. If I did, it was the mildest case ever that ever happened. So
Yeah, I get into hypochondriac things a lot. It's like, oh, I definitely have a serious disease.
right. Like, oh no, that's just a normal headache. You're not dying of emergency or something. At least for me. I'm like, oh right.
Oh yeah, I haven't drank water in 2 days.
Exactly. Oh right, you're dehydrated.
All right, I guess I'll go ahead and get started here. Make sure I don't look a fool real quick. Have Einstein keeping me company here.
There you go. Yeah.
All right. Hello and thank you for joining us on our UPS Jobs YouTube channel. I'm Duncan Southard and I'm an HR recruiter for UPS, and today I'm here with Dr. Allison McLeish. She's a professor of psychology at the University of Louisville and a licensed clinical psychologist who spent her years studying depression, anxiety, and smoking cessation. We wanted to take some time today to talk about our current situation involving the coronavirus and ways that we could possibly take steps to improve our well-being during this time. So, Dr. McLeish, thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I hope you're doing well amidst all these strange times. How are you feeling with all the changes?
I'm doing okay. I mean, it's, we're entering, I forget what week it is, 5, maybe 6. I don't know. I lost count. And it's getting harder as the weeks go on, but now that we're talking about some easing of restrictions, getting a little bit better, but yeah, good days and bad days. You do what you can.
It has its ups and downs.
Yeah, every day's, it's the same, but different emotionally.
Right. Well, I'm glad to hear that you're doing well. I've definitely heard some mixed reviews. Some people are really enjoying their time at home and others seem to be experiencing some issues. So I hope what we go over today can help some people overcome those issues. So just to begin, right now we're seeing a lot of people who are feeling mentally scattered, feeling a bit lost. They're stuck at home without their normal schedules to give them any kind of structure. So what are some ways that people can approach this problem?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Our lives have changed, and we are spending so much more time at home, and doing anything is just harder. And so I think while we all, would love to try to keep ourselves on track, it's just harder to do that right now. But I think the best thing that you can do is to try to keep yourself on as much of a schedule as possible. So if you had a typical work schedule that, if it was 9 to 5, get up, get dressed, take a shower, get dressed, and get ready for your day and treat it, and, eat your meals at your regular time, and try to do your day as normally as possible. Your schedule might be a bit different. But I think trying to adhere to a schedule, whatever that is, and not just sort of a free for all, because that's just going to lead you into, maybe just too much downtime or just not being able to be productive, cutting yourself some slack, but trying to have, doesn't need to be a rigid schedule, but holding yourself to some schedule can be really, really helpful.
Right. Yeah. Without that external structure like a job provides or anything like that, even the simple stuff just can become overwhelmingly difficult if you're left to do it all by yourself, especially if you're trying to give a schedule to someone else as well, somebody else in your household. But I remember when this was first starting, for quarantines were first starting, a lot of folks were saying that they'd have time to complete things on their to-do list. They'd have time to do a workout routine, or they'd have time to clean up the house. But even with this added time, not everybody is getting as much done as they thought they would. So what kind of suggestions do you have for those of us who aren't quite living up to the expectations that we had for ourselves?
Lower your expectations would be my biggest suggestion. But really, I mean, yeah, under normal circumstances, if you had all this quote unquote free time, yes, you could do a million things, but really it's not free time, right? That you have other things that right now I'm a single mom who's trying to do her job and also parent my almost 5-year-old. And we're all stuck together, and that's kind of tense. You can probably see the stuff in the background, his artwork, but I'm in the playroom right now. He is not super happy about that, but that's right. But just trying not to, I know people had all this stuff up, you're not doing Corona, the quarantine's right. If you're not learning a new skill and a new language and 18 other things and you haven't cleaned your house,
right.
Life is, as I said, life is harder now. It takes so much more time to do anything. If you think about going to the grocery store, you gotta make sure you got a mask. Are you washing your hands? And all of the mental energy that is taking up, and sort of the bandwidth that is taken up with this sort of lingering anxiety and stress that go easy on yourself. Like, you are not going to have the same level of energy as you would under normal circumstances. So if you follow the schedule that we just talked about, that's a good day, right? And you don't need to like cook 3 meals a day and cook these gourmet meals. Go back to basics. My son and I are having basically pigs in a blanket. We're having crescent rolls with hot dogs and cheese in them for dinner because we're going old school. Like, super easy. It's comfort food, you know, trying to really go easy on yourself.
Right.
Because these are not normal times. And so having really high expectations is really just setting yourself up for feeling bad. And that's not a good idea.
Yeah, especially now. And I think so many of us idealize this perfect version of ourselves where we can do everything we want to do and everything we need to do all in a perfectly timely manner. And that person is just never going to be. But we can
and that person doesn't exist under normal circumstances, and these aren't normal circumstances. So, you know, to think that we become bigger, better versions of ourselves under really highly stressful, semi-traumatic, you know, times, like, that's just, you know, if you get through the day and everybody's still alive, like, that's, you know, we're good.
It's a success.
It's a good day. We made it to the end.
Well, speaking of everybody making it out alive, I know being home a lot and for long periods of time, there's a lot of people seeing a rise in tension between their family or roommates or whoever they're living with. So how could people go about reducing that tension between those that they're living with?
Yeah, I mean, tensions are running high. Everybody's getting, I call it squirrely. My son and I are getting squirrely, and he and I are kind of at each other's throats some days. I mean, he's only 5. He can't really process all of this. But, you know, I think part of it is making sure that you take good care of yourself so that you can weather some of these stresses and the tension. And we are all under sort of, increased stress and in tight quarters. And so making sure that you're doing whatever self-care you usually do, you know, getting enough sleep, eating right, getting exercise, all of the sort of good things. But also trying to, in whatever environment you're in, trying to carve out a space for yourself that can be kind of your she shed, your man cave, your what have you, you know, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
That's sort of your space. I just, you know, some people I know go do it in a car, in a garage, but finding a space that you get to go there and it's yours and you can be away from everybody else and have that alone time. Because it can be really rough being around other people all the time and not having those sort of planned breaks from each other. But also at some point you may need to talk to the people that you're upset with. If there's something that they are doing that is driving you batty, you may want to talk to them about that and figure out a way that you can deal with whatever's causing the tension at a time when you guys are both calm. And so it's asking them like, hey, I want to talk about this. Is this a good time to talk? And not getting mad if they say no, that you guys both want to be sort of emotionally even keeled and not already upset to have those big conversations. And having some empathy. You know, I just said lower your expectations for yourself, maybe lower your expectations for other people. We're all doing the best that we can. And sometimes our best sucks. I mean, some days it really just kind of isn't great because we're stressed and we're all kind of dealing through this stuff. And so trying to, as much as you can, have some compassion and empathy for others as well as yourself.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because at the end of the day, we are all going through a very similar experience. So everyone else is probably going to feel pretty similar to how you're feeling as well. So, but yeah, in addition to that tension between people, a lot of people are experiencing increases in like negative emotions. That's pulling them down and impeding some of that productivity that they expected to have. So is that normal? Is that a normal occurrence to experience during times like this?
Absolutely. That we're seeing lots of folks talking about feeling really down and depressed and unmotivated, or feeling really anxious and scared. And there's a lot to be scared and worried about. And just the nature of being in this sort of quarantine situation almost mimics what it's like to be depressed. When folks are depressed, they stay home more, they isolate more, they're not doing as much, they're not as active, and they tend to lose motivation and they get really tired. And so this kind of mimics that. And so you need to try to find ways, you know, if people are kind of feeling that way, which is completely normal, but there are ways that you can sort of counteract that by, you know, making sure that you try to get active as much as you can, you know, trying to still connect with other people and not isolate even more. They're already sort of forced to. We're social beings. And so this isolation piece is really tough on us. So trying to find ways to connect virtually, you know, taking walks, getting outside, getting some of that sunlight, you know, being active, getting enough sleep, you know, all the sort of good good self-care things, but also really trying to stay connected with other people, particularly folks, we talked about tension. Some folks that I know are living alone and they have their dogs, and there might be some tension with the dogs. But they're also, they're getting tired of this. I'm all by myself. I don't have my normal ways of getting human interaction with others. And so really kind of checking on those folks if you know folks like that, but also if you are one of those people, trying to make sure that you're really good about connecting and doing things that you would normally do in person, try to do those virtually. And it doesn't have to be like through, I know we're all sort of getting zoomed out, so to speak, that we're all getting, tired of having all these meetings where we're video recorded. Go old school and talk on the phone. Then you just have to talk and you don't have to see the person necessarily, but you're still connecting. If you're tired of being on camera all the time, which I know many of us are sort of getting to that point. I talked to somebody else who was basically saying that, like I'm all dressed up on the top and underneath I'm wearing sweatpants. I'm tired of these Zoom meetings. It's going downhill fast. So, and I'm not trying to say that I'm tired of this by any means, but I think just in general, we're spending so much of our time in front of a computer screen, and it's not quite the same as true human interaction, but still finding ways to connect is really important.
You made a really interesting point that these isolative times, like during the quarantines, really do mimic a depressive lifestyle. Like you're not able to go out, you're not able to do the things you love, just like what happens when you're depressed. So, and we hear a lot of talk about depression and anxiety today, whether it be in media or in school, but these do seem to be on the rise now that the coronavirus appeared. So what exactly is the difference between these two, and why do you think they're becoming a bigger problem now?
Yeah, so depression really is, feeling really sad or just down or blue, and feeling kind of unmotivated, or and then we also have there's another sort of, when we talk about clinical levels of depression, there's something that goes along with it it's called anhedonia is the fancy name, but it's this idea where things that you used to enjoy don't bring you pleasure anymore. And so when people start feeling that way, they start sort of backing off from the things in their life, because they're like, well, I used to like to exercise, and I'm not finding that enjoyable anymore. So I'm going to stop doing it. And then they just, their life just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. And so unfortunately what's happened with coronavirus and the quarantine is our lives have been forced to get kind of small. And so I think really making sure, particularly if you know that you're prone to depression, really making sure that you try to do the things to take care of yourself, and to try to, be as active as you can, and do the things that even if they don't seem as enjoyable as they used to, still do them anyway. It's called behavioral activation. It's kind of fake it till you make it sometimes, of just going ahead and going through the motions, even if you're not super jazzed about it, just trying to do it anyway. But yeah, it is, it's normal to feel this way, but if it, I don't want to stress like the normal too much, that, for some folks, this is leading to feelings of feeling very down and depressed, and like they can't really do anything, maybe some thoughts of suicide. That's the point where they would want to get, professional help from a mental health provider. But the general sort of loneliness, even feeling sort of just unmotivated, and like, you just can't get yourself up off the couch or wherever, get out of bed. Some of that is pretty normal. So again, kind of cut yourself a little bit of slack, but try to get out of bed or get off the couch, and at least every once in a while, and
push through it a little bit.
Yeah, you got to push through it. And if you're finding it really, really difficult to push through it, that may be where you want to try to consider, has this gotten a little bit more serious, and I need to talk to somebody. And then, anxiety, like this is a really anxiety provoking situation, right? There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of uncertainty. And as humans, we like things to be predictable and certain, and that is just not how it is right now. And so it makes sense that folks are really anxious. And one thing that I can say, at least for the anxiety piece, that one way to help cope with that is that, particularly if your anxieties are around things related to COVID-19, is to limit your interactions with media about it. That, the news media, they're trying to get us to keep watching, right? And that's how they make their money. And so they are going to, sensationalize things, and, they're going to make things potentially, sometimes seem worse than they really are. And I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist or anything, but they're trying to get people to pay attention. The whole thing, if it bleeds, it leads. And so they're doing the equivalent of that to get people to keep paying attention. And so I think limiting the amount of media that you listen to throughout the day, and being very cognizant of where you get your information from. So going to, sort of sources that are trusted news sources, whether it's, even the Courier Journal, like I don't necessarily, the Courier Journal has some really good information. Other things they're, sort of getting on those like human interest stories, which are, that can be a little bit much. So I think,
Yeah.
Bashir's, if you want to just watch Bashir's talks, at 5 every day and have beers with Bashir and then do it that way, that's one thing to do. But really limit, there's really not that much new stuff coming out. And so once a day, the recommendations are really for no more than an hour. And even that is a lot. And, from places like the New York Times or maybe the CDC or someplace where you can get really objective information, and then and really kind of get what you need and then kind of get out, because you can go down a rabbit hole of all the links to the other articles and things like that. And
right.
watching, even watching, televised news, they're going to, try to suck you in and sensationalize things.
Right. And it's so hard once you find a rabbit hole and start falling into it, it is so hard to stop, because you can get more and more information, and of course you have no idea how reliable that information is. But
yeah, I started to do it today, that they were starting to talk about that, the first death that we thought was from coronavirus actually wasn't the first one, that there were these 2 earlier ones, and it led to this whole, different articles to read and trying to figure out like where all this has come from. And,
right.
it's interesting. And for me, it's, that's more interesting than anxiety provoking. But I think if you're noticing yourself becoming more anxious, then those would be the types of articles to stop reading and figure out like what information is going to be helpful. Like what information do you need to know? Like, do you really need to know the number of new cases every day? Is that helpful to you, or is that making you nervous?
Right.
And, we're not seeing a lot of changes on a day-to-day basis as we were early on, in terms of restrictions and things like that. And so, taking a break from all that is really important.
Right. And that's extremely difficult. And along with the depression, anxiety stuff we're seeing, like impulse control is also, a lot of people are having difficulty with impulse control right now. It's on the rise with coronavirus. So, whether it be too much social media, trouble regulating eating habits, or maybe having a drink a little too early in the day, a little more regularly than you did before. But yeah, we're seeing that's a lot more common now. So what are ways that maybe we could force ourselves to be a little more in control of our impulsive behaviors?
Yeah, I think you want to look at like, what are the things that you're doing that are sort of, related to impulse control, whether it's, too much media use, too much drinking, is what's driving that? Is it, is it being driven by your anxiety and your worry about things, or you're trying to manage your emotions? Then you want to think about, well, what are some ways that I could, deal with my emotions? What am I feeling, and what might help me feel better? Because, that drink really isn't going to make you feel better. It's actually going to make you feel more anxious and more depressed.
Right.
Going into social media, depending on what you do with it, if you use it to connect with a friend, that can be really useful. Or you're going, all the online, exercise and physical health options, whether it's meditation, yoga classes, Pilates, exercise classes. There's a lot of free options right now, which are great. And I encourage people to make use of those. But, I think trying to do other things, whether it's, okay, I want to maybe watch something on Netflix that's really a comedy and really lighthearted, and something that is completely, devoid, just a quick, finding, like, I just rewatched The Office, something that just trying to, that's, I'm not going super deep into anything because I'm like, that's a little bit too heavy right now. But,
right.
Something like that as a way, because you want to try to take your mind off things. And I think that's what some of this stuff that people are trying to do. You just want to do it in a healthy way rather than a maladaptive way. I will say the eating one is hard. We're all at home more. The food is right there.
It's right there.
So a lot of it's out of boredom. And so that one, I think, cut yourself a little bit of slack. Like, if you feel like it's becoming a problem, try to change up your habits a little bit, and instead of eating, getting something to drink, like water or something, or going outside or doing something else with your hands. But I think some of that is just, we are home more often. We're not in our regular schedule. And so it's just really easy to head to the pantry. I find myself doing it. I know a lot of other people are doing it too. So that one's, a little bit sort of, go easy on yourself. Don't beat yourself up over that. If you gain a couple of pounds, it's not the end of the world.
Right.
You stayed healthy. And so I think that's really the bigger picture to pay attention to.
Right. Yeah. We see when students go to college for the first time, you see that freshman 15 come on. I think now we're seeing quarantine 15 come on. At least I know I am. But
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have people that talk about like, I've been wearing elastic waist pants for so long. I need to put on my regular jeans to see if they still fit. And I'm kind of scared, but it'll come off, when you get back
right.
into your normal life, like you'll get back into the swing of things. And I think that's why trying to find ways, where if you get into a routine at home
Mhm.
and keep yourself busy in that way, I think that can help too with some of that stuff.
Well, good. So for those of us who maybe aren't facing a new schedule necessarily, for like essential workers, many of those people are working longer hours, dealing with a lot more stress at work in terms of coming in contact with other employees and things like that. How can essential workers go about dealing with this kind of stress, and how are ways that maybe other folks that know them can also help support them during this time?
Yeah, I mean, my hats go off to the essential workers that are on the front lines dealing with extra stresses, extra hours, and all of that. I think, a lot of the same things that we're talking about still apply in terms of really trying to take good care of yourself. I mean, sort of
Mhm.
health-wise, washing your hands. I mean, all those things, of course,
Sure.
but I think, from a mental health perspective, making sure that you are taking care of yourself and that you're not burning the candle at both ends, so that if you're working a lot, then you need to, come home and you need to make sure that you're getting enough rest. I think that that's really important. And maybe talking with your family members about what you need in order to be able to get that rest. Or if you're a family member of somebody that's an essential worker, maybe talking with them about what can I do to lighten your load? Like, can I, if you guys have split
Mhm.
chores, like, can I take over some of the stuff that you normally do because you've got your hands full? Kind of let some stuff go if it's not essential. Like if you're an essential worker, everything else that's essential, really evaluate, is this really critical that I do this or not?
Right.
Are there other ways that I can do to kind of make my life easier?
Mhm.
And trying to do that. I think being as nice to yourself as possible, and trying to sort of, be as open with family members about what you need. And part of it's having the sort of the knowledge of what you do need. And so checking in with yourself about, what do I need to do to be able to get through this day, to be able to get through this stressful period? What is it at work that is there something that could be changed or different at work that would make me feel more comfortable? That I might need to speak up about, if
Right.
it's something that could be changed. But really kind of checking in with yourself to see what you need.
Mhm. So a lot of these essential workers, so they are maybe working more hours, and a lot of them, including our UPS folks, are also shift workers. So they're working strange hours anyway. They're working through the night, and then they come home during the twilight and have to sleep during the day, which is its own difficult experience. So do you have any suggestions for those that work night shift and are just piled on this huge, terrible schedule that they don't really have a ton of control over?
Yeah, one of my first jobs out of college, I did shift work. I worked third shift and then second shift, and it's hard. Like, I didn't last very long at it because I wasn't very good at it. But I think, it's hard.
Right.
I think particularly if you're doing shift work and you're used to coming home and nobody else is home and you can get more sleep,
Mhm.
then, I think sleep is critical really for shift workers. That's what I've seen in the students at U of L. And, I think that's what I've experienced, and that's what the research says. But, I think part of the problem is when you get home, you need to kind of trick your body into not realizing that it's daytime.
Mhm.
And so finding an area to sleep in that is as dark as you can get it. If you need to wear a mask, if you need to wear earplugs, white noise machine, turn the temperature down. We do better when it's colder,
Mhm.
in our sleeping area. So if you need a fan, if you need something, and really trying to get to sleep as soon as you can after your shift.
Mhm.
And studies have also shown that, if you can get as much sleep as you can, early on, and then maybe a shorter nap right before you go in for your shift. But I think, again, trying to talk with your families about, I'm going to need to sleep during this time. Can you please try to be quiet? Can we sort of, you guys are upstairs, I'm down, try to figure out a place, like, just like I said, trying to find your own sort of spot. Where's your sleeping spot going to be? I think that's going to be the most important piece. But also, are there ways that you can, navigate, like, okay, so I'm going to sleep here, but maybe I can get up and we have a snack together in the afternoon or something, so you can still get to spend time with your family. Because that's one of the benefits of being at home right now is that we do get to spend more time together with our families, for better or for worse some days. But trying to find ways that you can still connect with them, despite the changes in schedules. Because usually if one person is doing shift work, nobody else in the family is what what I've seen is, like, they're
Right.
usually the only ones. And so it's really hard to to do that. And I don't know how UPS does it, if they sort of block the days together, if on your off days, if you have a block of off days, trying to get back onto a day shift for those off days is really helpful too. So then you do get to sort of live the way that everybody else does, because it's hard. What your schedule is just usually completely opposite to the rest of the world, and that gets to be pretty challenging.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in terms of my experience working night shift, it was always, I wanted to be up during the day. So I'd get off work and the sun would come out and be really bright outside and I was awake. It's like, well, I guess I'll just stay up. Sleep's probably not that important, right? But yeah, it's obvious that making sleep a priority, and possibly number one priority for shift workers, is probably the best deal, because it can be very, very difficult, especially when you get absolutely no sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I did the same thing. I'd be like, oh, I'll take a nap right before I go into work. And that never happened. I never did that. So finding what works for you, but, trying to mimic nighttime, because our bodies, we have to trick our bodies into thinking it's still nighttime.
Right.
Melatonin, something natural can help, sort of regulate that. Trying not to drink. I know I almost hate to say this, because it's what gets you through the third shift itself, is, too many caffeinated beverages,
Right, yeah.
Particularly later in your shift. And I know that's when it's harder to stay awake, but then you've gotten all this caffeine in your body. And then some people then, offset that with taking something to help them sleep, like Tylenol PM or something like that. And so then you're just sort of bouncing back and forth between those things. And so I think if you can try to do it without some of that, but I know that that's a hard thing to do.
Right. Yeah, it can be very hard. But well, on another note, before we log off here, I want to shout out kind of to our parents around the world. I know since these quarantine times, parents are facing some new challenges. I know it can feel like you're doing two full-time jobs at once. If you're working from home, you're doing all your work here. And then, of course, you have the kiddos who are just a full-time job in themselves 24/7 anyway. So do you have any thoughts on ways that parents could make the most out of this time with their kids?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm dealing with it too. I've got a almost 5-year-old who's at home, and luckily I have some help with childcare, so I can do things like this and he's not in the background. But there's also, been days where he's on a screen a lot. So I think, a lot of people are very hesitant or had very strict restrictions on screen time. No, this is not a time to worry about that. That sometimes, let some of that stuff go by the wayside. If you have stuff you need to get done and that kiddo is not entertaining themselves, well, then, this is whatever you need to do to get through it. So I think, expecting well-balanced meals and everything is going to be done perfectly is, again, cutting yourself some slack. That's just, if you need to have quesadillas or chicken nuggets every night because that's what your kiddo wants, because they don't depending on the age, they're not going to get this, or they just need some comfort. And we've seen some regression in kids too, that they're going to be acting a little bit younger because this is stressful for them too. And they don't have the coping capacity that we do. They don't have the ability to regulate their emotions. They don't have the words to often to use to say what's going on with them. So they're going to be crankier too. And you're cranky too. And that's really where it gets to be a problem. That's what I've noticed myself, is I was not blessed with a lot of patience on a good day. And this is not, these are not good times. And so really trying to just remind myself that, he's dealing with this too. He just can't tell me that that's why he's cranky. And he can't even really tell me that he's cranky. He just doesn't want to do what I tell him to do. So I think as much as you can to try to connect with your kiddos and love on them and give them the hugs and reassuring them if they're prone to anxiety, trying to keep them on a schedule, but not so rigid of a schedule that it's hard. But again, my son would love to stay in his PJs all day, but we get dressed every day and we brush our teeth every day. But he's watching more of his iPad than normal. And that's just what we need to do, because this isn't normal times. And my hats go off to folks that are trying to school their kids too and try to do school stuff. Cause luckily mine's in preschool and they're not doing anything school related, but trying to do your job, parent, and then be a teacher is a whole nother level. So go easy yourself on that. Like, you are not a full-time teacher. So do what you can, but it's not going to be perfect. And just, trying to schedule some fun in and do some fun things things, and trying to reframe it that maybe, that what helps you get through is that there is time that you guys are going to have more meal times together. So instead of just dinner, you guys get to have lunch together too. That's, a little bit more time together, but also you probably are going to need some alone time too. And so, sometimes that if your kiddo's on their screen, like that doesn't mean that you have to be productive and be working. You could be on your own screen. Like you could be doing whatever else you need to do, whether it's exercise, sit, and I've been playing games on my phone, like whatever it is, because I just need to decompress.
Right.
And so don't feel like you have to be productive every single moment that, your kid's occupied with something else.
Right. Well, I think these are a lot of good points, and I really hope that this information will be helpful to a lot of folks that are struggling and folks that tuned in. So I hope that this can help us get through this strange time that we're experiencing. And thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been great, and we will get through this. I promise, guys. But it's been tough, but hang in there a little bit longer, and we'll get through it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I think that went well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Is there anything else that you feel like we want to like redo or something? Like I'm not thinking from my end that I was like, oh, I wish I would have said X, Y, and Z, but from your end, is there something that
No, I think that was honestly the ideal way that it could have gone. I may have fumbled a word here or there, but people have done worse. I don't care.
I mean, I think it's just that's the way life goes. I don't think I think they'll appreciate that it's just sort of